I.S.U.P.K. Oh, and West. Babylon is falling to rise no more again. Babylon is falling. Freedom is here, my friend, not just part of the nation. YAHANNA never come bring peace, him start of the vision. Now put your trust in the riches and wealth, guns are ammunition. But just the last statutes and commandments, we make the decision to keep them with precision. I just part of the mission. Daniel get a vision, him see the black Christ, it wasn't a white depiction. No allegiance to Rome nor its regions, come out them religion if you want be a free man. Cause the deacons them full of demons, same situation with Rasta with Islam. Only beacon of hope for your lean on is I.S.U.P.K and the General YAHANNA. Every fowl of the ear, every beast of the field, every creeping thing we creep on land, every mouth of the clear, loud and clear. YAHANNA is a black man who have ear, let him hear. Time to prepare, spiritually separate from Babylon. We no weak, we no fear, we no tear. Guns are the mic, but him and are just part of the nation. YAHANNA never come bring peace, in start of the vision. Now put your trust in the riches and wealth, guns are ammunition. I just the last statutes and commandments, we make the decision to keep them with precision. Just part of the nation, send evils and curses on the whole city and the beasts and all churches. America fall, them deserve it. Rome get defeat, history repeat, I know the first days. Hey, 400 years they work with, then desert with, then turn round and call we worthless. But now the COVID lurking, them hurting, and then the doctors and nurses. Hey, one day to a building of a turn after the long journey. No care much money you a earn if you still want Babylon burn. One day to a building of a turn after the long journey. No care much money you a earn. Hey, I just part of the mission. YAHANNA never come bring peace, in start of the vision. No put your trust in the riches and wealth, guns are ammunition. I just the last statutes and commandments, we make the decision to keep them with precision. I just part of the mission.
Yeah. I want West in I place once more. Yeah, easy. You wanna know where me come from? You wanna know where me come from? I believe it. You wanna know where me come from? I don't pan the Middle East, but y'all out the West one get the kid peace. Me step over to pretty Christine, a big broad smile and giggling teeth. Have a brand new 4-5 pretty crisp clean. Me deal with the chica press pretty pristine. Them say them bad but we no intrigue. If you this now your top 10 killing increase. I we no join both sides. I one West are the best you fi know boy. You put a S on your chest when the chrome pint. Every bone a broke when left lone tribe. Make a force right boy if you know your size. Don't see me on the street and a 4-5. You get ratchet knife in your throat pipe. Man will make your chop flesh like your ghost rise. Give up the ghost, make it boat wife. Y'all shut up, bend over, pan to a pint. Fuck you, make you get wet like a boat ride. If you hold tight, y'all, me a hold tight. Alright, no later, then more time. Me have things to do, but got more fight. Lucky where the nanny, y'all do bright. Then we shoot the bumbo clad to a grind. That's where me come from. I don't pan the Middle East, but y'all out the West one get the kid piece. Me step over to pretty Christine, a big broad smile and giggling teeth. Have a brand new 4-5 pretty crisp clean. Me deal with the chica press pretty pristine. Them say them bad but we no intrigue. If you this now you top 10. Yeah, them too bad, I just smoke them off, I just slogan. You coulda big and tough like Hulk Hogan. You get your own a bag, you get total. Send your soul to God, their best no God. The whole fucking clip of your own that. No come set, no chop for your own bat. I go get sent off, we run postal. Get a PO box. She say me handsome, she want hold me cocky at ransom. She want hood fi broke, she want yam some. She say breed me, give me that one son, boy. We have shotgun, we have Remington, we have Magnum. So if a beef you want, you can have some. Anything we come turn in a phantom. And where we come from, I don't want the Middle East, but y'all out the West one get the kid peace. Me step over to pretty Christine, a big broad smile and giggling teeth. Have a brand new 4-5 pretty crisp clean. We deal with the trigger press pretty pristine. Them say them bad but we no intrigue. If you this now you talk them killing increase. Increase, 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 increase. You know, you know. Yeah, it's I one was in a building. I know when we come through, just hide the gal them and hide the liquor.
Hey, listen, brothers and sisters, man. If you like what you hear, hit the subscribe button, man. Subscribe to this channel. And also, please, go to ISUPK.com and pay your tithe. Drop me some cash so we can move around this planet like we need to, man, and do the things we need to do.
They're one West. They're one West. They're one West. They're
Hey, Shalom, Yahweh Bashim, Shabrakatam to all the brothers, Yahweh Shamar Lathan Bashim, Yoshai to all the sisters. I'm Priest and Officer 500 Barak Yalla with the I.S.U.P.K, which stands for the Israelite School of Universal and Practical Knowledge, taught out of 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under Commanding General YAHANNA. I understand since 1969 we've been giving you nothing but the truth about who you really are. I'm Tom, and I'm addressing our people, so-called Blacks, Latinos, and Native American Indians. We're teaching you the history about your culture, your people, your language, then your 7 days a week. You understand? The truth never stops. The truth is everywhere. You can find it 24/7. Just look up any I.S.U.P.K YouTube channel. Google the I.S.U.P.K in your zone. It is time like never to come to class to change your life. You understand? Time is short. Time is ticking. We're running out of it. Then you're living on borrowed time for ever since, you know, we got kicked out of our land. You understand? And we're back at it again with our history classes. Salakia, last week we had some things to deal with, but we're back at it again with the history classes. This is the third part of the last class, which is the history of Black people in Montreal. Because it's like, if you come to Canada, it's damn near already taboo to speak about Black history in Canada, because Black history in Canada is the same as in the US and the Caribbean. Slavery. You understand? But in Canada, it's then you're taboo to bring that out to the light. The same way it's taboo to speak about the fact that our Gadite brothers and sisters, so-called Native American Indians, were slaves right next to us. As a matter of fact, 2/3 of the slaves in Canada were natives. They're not going to talk about that. You know, we see some of the Black figures in Canada that they don't speak about. Caesar Joannot, who was running the first business in Montreal. You understand? But there's nothing named after him. He was a successful businessman during slavery. Imagine that. Or what's his name again? John Trim, a successful landscaper. Man was buying houses, property during slavery. Imagine during slavery, you're a nigga with money and properties. I call it the monopoly nigga. Salakia. That's who he is. You understand? This man was building a capital for himself, and unlike our oppressor, our slave master, these two brothers, just to name a few, knew how to read and write. They had their own signature, while most of white people didn't, right? So we'll get back into it. I'm gonna share my screen. Any questions or comments, don't hesitate, put them in the chat, right? Give me 1 second. Now this one, I'm only going to mention this one for a fact that ever since slavery, there is a notion of being of mixed descent, right? This is the reason why, what's his name again? Who's Dr. Umar's Johnson ancestor again? I forgot his name, right? Dr. Umar say he claims to be descendant of Frederick Douglass. That's his name. Frederick Douglass really is a white man. He's a Bob Marley. You understand? And this brother that we're going to see right here, right? Well, Salakia, this person we're going to talk about right here, they mention it in the book Montreal Black then, but really, he's not, according to his lineage, he would not be a brother. You understand? In the I.S.U.P.K, that's what you don't get, is that we're studied scholars. Not because they're going to come to us with melanin, we're going to automatically say, you know what, you're a brother. We're going to ask questions. We're going to do a little investigation, because people who look like Bob Marley, people may consider them brothers because they have melanin, because they have a certain type of hair texture. Now come to find out, you descend from Irish slave masters, French slave master. You're a whole Spaniard. For the longest time, people thought Salma Hayek was a beautiful Mexican sister. Salma Hayek is a Lebanese woman. Her father is Lebanese, from Lebanese immigrants that moved to Mexico. Just like Shakira. Shakira, I was heartbroken. I was like, damn. Shakira not Colombian. At least not of indigenous or Negro descent. Shakira is also Lebanese. You understand? So not because you're going to come to us saying you're black, Latino, or native, they'll automatically open up the door. No, you have to ask who your father is. It's our custom. Why? Because we know that you are the seed of your father. Right? Now let's get into the class. So you're going to see this one that we're going to talk about. He's included. I just mentioned it because he's going to be included in the book, Montreal Black Den, but really he's not a brother. So if you look him up, just remember that if they mention him to you, well, guess what? He was not a brother. He's not one of us. You understand? So the black men of Montreal who served their country in the war are going to march. Well, I mean, their ghosts are, because the men themselves are long gone. I'm talking about the War of 1812. The one in front carrying the flag, that's Hero Richardson, 17 when he joined. So that's the one who they claim is a brother, but he's really not a brother. That's what we're going to go over, just to let you know that he's not a brother. So whether or not he served for Canada, he could have served for the US, he could have served for the loyalists, or loyal, that's what they call loyalists, to England. It didn't matter. He was the seed of his Caucasian father, Salakia. Born in Green Island, wherever that is. Only Green Island I know is near Troy, New York. It was end of May 1814, almost 2 years in the war, when he enlisted as a private in the 1st Battalion of Selected Embodied Militia. Most of the action was over. He got no bounty when he signed up, and the others got up to £5, but Hero got zipped. He did get some extra pay his first month. He joined on May 30th, but he was paid from the 25th, making 5 extra days pay at 6 pence a day, out of 2 shillings and 6. I forgot what the D stands for again, but that's part of the currency back then, right? Just show you that he's going to be mentioned here. We're going to skip him because he was not a brother. When you read about the Voltigeurs, which is their crew, right? He is not a brother. You understand? Hero is not our hero. So if black people as a whole, let's switch to the next one, right? If black people as a whole accounted for something in Montreal in the 1830s, there are signs that they did. Alexander Grant was a big part of it. We're going to see who that is. Why a man would leave New York City and move to Montreal, God knows. But that's what Grant did in 1830 when he was 29, when slavery was still alive and well in Canada. And what's one of the first things a New Yorker with smarts does when he sets up shop in a new place? He advertises. And that's what Grant does. Economy and elegance. His ad in the paper said, "Old garments cleansed and made to look as well as new by Alexander Grant from New York at number 80 St. Paul Street, nearly opposite of Mr. Rolling's barber. Orders would be received at Mr. Rolling's barber in St. Paul Street." Now imagine that. How many black men had their business advertised during slavery in the newspaper? During slavery, you were advertised as merchandise, not as a businessman. They're never going to teach you that, though. So he's a dry cleaner or laundryman, and well, they call it scurrying. He was a scurrer. But don't go judging a man by what he does for a living. You can't confuse a living with a life. A living is something you do for money, and life is something else. See, that's one of his advertisements. You know, usually the advertisement when it came to black people in Montreal was about a brother being sold, a brother or sister being sold, right? So in fact, there was more to Grant's newspaper ad than meets the eye. For one thing, it was probably the first time Black barber James Rawlings had seen his name in print. And another thing, it was the first time a Black had advertised his services in a Montreal newspaper. Go ahead and look, you won't find any earlier. Why? Because you were the merchandise being advertised before that. Imagine, he was the first Black man to have his, first of all, he had a business. He was the first Black man to have an ad in the Montreal newspaper. If it was a couple years before, he probably been advertised as merchandise to be sold. The fact that Grant was a witness at Paola Brown's wedding in 1832, still during slavery, may give us a hint that he was into Black causes, Brown having been fundraising at the time. But it's 1833 before we really get a fix on Grant, the summer after he bought that sword at the sale of John Trim's Thames. In London, British members of Parliament, inspired by the old anti-slavery champion William Wilberforce, who was on his deathbed, were pushing hard to get a bill passed to abolish slavery in the West Indies. And that's when a lot of people, you're going to find out that they wanted to side with England, because England was like regarded as being just, regarded as being humane, because they wanted to abolish slavery. A lot of people think, yeah, England was so great because they're the first one to abolish slavery. Really, Haiti, by that time, Haiti had already claimed its independence, and France did not free Haiti in 1804. The Haitians took their freedom. You understand? They did not ask for permission. But the British are known to be the first one to actually free the slaves, or as so they claim, right? And when they said to abolish slavery in the West Indies, mind you, this is just in the English colonies, because Martinique were still slaves to what, 1844. 1844 was when slavery was abolished in the French colonies. So Grant called a meeting of the colored brethren of Montreal at his home on St. Paul Street for July 23rd to hash it out. 12 Black men took part, counting Grant. It took some doing. Not all of them were the best friends. Peter Dago and Jacob Abdallah, for instance, had had a big blow up 3 years earlier. Abdallah had ended up jabbing Dago pretty hard with a fork. So he stabbed the brother, right? And they were beefing together. They're saying some of these brothers, you know, they had issues to deal with, like internal beef. Like the man got stabbed with a fork. Good night. For what reason? Who knows? You understand? Even though brothers were trying to live, were kind of forced to live within each other, right? That doesn't mean that they necessarily had brotherhood. They did not have the truth. You understand? But Grant brought them together, and maybe Celia hid the cutlery just to be sure. Being a New Yorker, he knew about blowing your horn and using the media. So they put out a press release saying they had adopted these resolutions. Which ones? We're going to see right here. That as British subjects, we duly appreciate the blessings of the Constitution under which we have the happiness to live, a Constitution which will ever be dear to our hearts. Why he's saying as British subjects? Because before, damn near most of Canada, it's not 2/3 of Canada, and a part of the US, mainly the Midwest, was called New France, was under French rulership until the British took over. This is why Canada is still a quote-unquote a commonwealth of the British Empire. Technically, they're British subjects. They're not under the French no more, right? Slovakia. A constitution which the march of chastened intellect has stamped with its highest approbation, and which is the envy and admiration of the civilized world. They're saying, you know what, as British subject, we're so thankful, so on and so forth. Britain is about to end slavery and yada, 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 right? Now, second resolution, that as men and as Christians, we must naturally feel anxious that the sacred blessings we enjoy should be extended to the habitable globe. Consequently, we are being peculiar, right? Anxious that our brethren of the British West India colonies should fully participate in the glorious privileges we are so justly proud of. They say free the Jamaican slaves. Let them taste freedom like we're tasting freedom. Free the people for Barbados, Bahamas, Barbuda. That's what they're saying, right? They want to share the Christian freedom, which is crazy work, because Christians today are still slaves in the church. This go to Jamaica right now. Jamaica is gentrifying all the beaches throughout every single island. There's gentrification of the land. You understand? They're buying the beaches and they're preventing Jamaicans from being on Jamaican beaches. Imagine that. Now, that was a quick sidebar. So now, third resolutions, we therefore contemplate with intense anxiety the progress of the bill which His Majesty's ministers have introduced into Parliament for a total abolition of slavery in the West Indies, and we wish it complete success. Why can they be so free to talk about slavery being abolished at the time? It's 1833. Slavery was abolished in Canada officially in 1834. You know, so that's why they could be so free to speak like that. I said they want it abolished totally in the West Indies because, you know, where they knew we were the same people. You understand? They know we're the same people. Ain't no different. I mean, the so-called, that's why I don't get the foundational Black Americans, which really are idiots. Besides the fact that the movement was started by a white woman, so-called Black Canadians, a lot of them are Judites that just moved up north. So they're technically Black Americans that move up north. So even for them to say Drake is, during the Kendrick and Drake beef, Drake is not Black, is not our people or whatnot. Drake's father is from Memphis. And even then, a lot of, again, Black Canadians are really Black Americans that just moved up north. And some Black Americans are Black Canadians that moved down south. Because just like they were fleeing America, going to Canada to free from slavery, Canada was as bad where they had to flee Canada to go to the US to free from slavery. But because of the indoctrination of the white man, you think y'all two different people. Well, back then, Grant said, our brothers in the West Indies need to be free, just like us in America. It's like us in Canada. You understand? Stop listening to white people. You sound dumb as hell. You sound Christian. Salakia. And wish it complete success, conceiving it to be the harbinger of light and life and liberty to all of our fellow brethren and subjects. And we hereby most respectfully tender to His Majesty's ministers and to all the friends of humanity, our heartfelt acknowledgments for their benevolent and godlike exertions. Listen, you gotta understand that white Christianity and Black Christianity are two different things. The concept of being Christian to white people is, you know, conquering, revenge, assimilation. The concept of Christianity to Black people is let's share freedom and love and liberty, light, life, and forgiveness. Two different concepts. When we learned from the murderous maniacs, and that's the crazy part. So let's continue. So they all put their names to it, most with an X. Why? Because those were those who didn't have a signature. You see, when you sign with an X, that was a sign that you didn't know how to. Yeah, a lot of y'all didn't know how to write, and those who knew how to write, some of them didn't even have a signature. Unlike brothers like Caesar Jonot or what's the name again of the brother, John Trim, right? So Grant first. The others were Jacob Della, Jared Banks, John Broom, Peter Dago, and Jacob Grant, who's not related to the first Grant, right? Lewis Green, Anthony Hinksman, Abraham Lowe, John Russell, Joseph Shaw, and Thomas Smith. The abolition passed that August and was scheduled to come into effect on August 1st, 1834. And of course, 12 Black men meeting in Montreal, even if they'd been the 12 apostles, weren't going to make much difference to what happened in the British Parliament. But that isn't the point. And nobody knew that we had a Black coalition back then in Montreal in slavery. Imagine that. They don't teach that in high school. They don't teach that they don't just teach that in any educational institution. The only school that you'll learn about that is in the Israelite School of Universal and Practical Knowledge, where we teach you real history about your people. The point is, they were speaking to the hometown crowd, Like Grant, when he advertised his current business, it was the first time that Black Montrealers had held a formal meeting and issued a public statement on a public issue. Y'all want to talk about free Quebec, the referendum or whatever nonsense, you know, Louis Papineau had their white Quebec Christ version of Christ for them. They're not talking about Grant and the coalition of 12 Black men speaking on the issues of Black people during slavery. They're never going to talk about that. But they're always going to remember their people. You understand? Now, mind you, you need to remember your people as well. We weren't just slaves during slavery. As you can see, some of us had businesses, had advertisement in the newspaper where you used to be advertised as merchandise. John Trim was a successful business and property owner. You understand? Salaki. And it wasn't about themselves or some neighborhood squabble. You see, they only want to talk about how gangs formed in Montreal or whatnot. The Haitians became Bloods and Crips. The Jamaicans are running the West Side, shooting up each other, and how it all started. Let's talk about the first Black coalition in Montreal. How about that? Let's talk about that. Let's make a documentary about that, as opposed to talking about the gangs, the Bloods and the Crips in Montreal. Yeah. It was about abolishing slavery in the West Indies, where some of them had connections. Not all Black Canadians were Judites. Again, some of them were brought here as slaves from the West Indies. Some of them directly were taken from the coast of West Africa, where we dwelt temporarily in a land that was not ours. But a lot of them had connections to the West Indies. For example, I think his name is Mathieu Léveillé, a French Benjamite who was sent to Quebec because he kept running away from the plantations in Martinique. He was told, either we cut your feet or you become an executioner. He chose to become an executioner, but I'm not going to go in details in that because we're going to make a whole class about him. Y'all don't worry, y'all just stay tuned, yeah? So we're here, they were signaling. We got our eye on the world in case anyone figured that Blacks couldn't see beyond their own backyard. That's the kind of thing Grant was up to. So how come nobody's heard of him? I'm going to tell you why nobody's heard of Grant. It's simple. Because the white man is the devil the Bible speaks of. That's why. And the only history that matters is the history of the conqueror. That's why. Well, he didn't stay around long, only 8 years, but that's not it. One reason is that when people today look back at the Quebec of 1830s or Lower Canada, as it was called, they see white and nothing else. What did I tell you? The conqueror will write history. What's important about remembering Canada is the settlers, the fur trade, and building Canadian history. Hockey. What is it? The poutine, which is fries and gravy, right? Free Quebec, Upper and Lower Canada, so on and so forth. They're not teaching about slavery. They won't say that James McGill, the founder of the McGill University in Montreal, which is the equivalent of Harvard in Canada, was a slave owner and fought to keep his slaves. Not going to teach that. Again, it says what? One reason is that when people today look back at the Quebec of the 1830s or Lower Canada, as it was called, they see white and nothing else. That's just 4 years before slavery was abolished. Where were the slaves? Both Black and natives. Where were they? They're not talking about that. They don't want to shed the light. As opposed to the US, who has a flag that represents slavery, the Confederate flag, that they can't deny was during the time of slavery. Canada doesn't have a Confederate flag. We could say, yo, this is related to slavery. They don't. That doesn't mean that the history is erased. Hidden doesn't mean erased. You understand? Lost doesn't mean inexistent. The lost tribes are still here, just like the hidden history is still here as well. Salakia. They get wrapped up in the old news of white on white violence. Oh, good night. Listen. Say it. Listen. It's just pure coincidence that such incident happened a couple days ago. and I had to read this. That was not planned at all. But they get wrapped up in the old news on white-on-white violence, patriots versus the Tories, French versus the English, reformers versus bureaucrats, whatever the case is, the loyalists, right? That bubbled for years before boiling over in the rebellions of 1837 and 38, when a lot of people died for nothing. Another reason why Grant is forgotten is racism, because yes, Canada is as racist as the US. I don't know how we have to tell you that. Y'all go look around the world right now. White nationalists, neo-Nazis, and just proud white people are marching to make their countries white again. Whether it's in Canada, in the US, in the UK, in France, in Australia, in Spain. A devil is a devil wherever he's at. Whatever land he conquered, he's still a devil. Nothing has changed. They have the same history. They just speak probably a different dialect or language, but it's the same devil. The devil the Bible speaks of, descendants of Esau, of the Edomites. So another reason why Grant is forgotten is racism. Racism in Montreal was not up front like in the US. It was quiet and lawless, you might say, because nobody talked about it much and there were no racial law or no laws against racism. So we didn't have Jim Crow laws, but the racism was still here. But it didn't say Jim Crow laws specifically. You understand? As opposed to, like, for example, the black codes in the French Caribbean, right? In the quote-unquote free American states, you had segregation with laws that said blacks couldn't marry whites, couldn't testify against whites in court, and couldn't vote in elections. Even churches boxed blacks off in Negro pews. There was none of this in Montreal, and blacks did marry whites, they take whites to court, and did vote. There were no hard rules to fight against, only attitudes. If you've ever had to fight an attitude, you know it's not like fighting a law, as you can't take on its state of mind the way you can fight against official segregation or apartheid. Meaning you can't change their nature. There's no laws, but that's their nature. You cannot change or fight against the natural racism you will face from white people because it's their nature. It's one thing to fight the dragon when it's out in the open. You can slay it with your sword and you've got the body to prove it's dead. But when the dragon is a bad idea in people's heads, how can you tell it's a dragon? How can you even convince people it's there? And this is for all you Christians out there, right? It's so hard for you to understand that white people despise you even though you claim that you worship the same God. Listen, they make you worship white people. Tell white people to worship black people and see if they would like to do it. Since you have no problem worshiping white people, why can't they do the same and not have a problem about it? And let's see what they think, yeah? To kill it, you've got to get inside people's head and make them think. And there'll always be some who will say that there were never was any dragon except in your head. And that's what Grant was up against, because he had to tell his people, yes, listen, white people in Canada are racist. Why can't you see it? It's not hard to see. I mean, in 2025, they're even more open about it. They can't hide the truth. They'll tell you, go back to your country. They'll tell you, over here, you speak French in Quebec. Over there, you speak English. And this is Canada. We're proud to be Canadians. Go tell that to the Native Americans who you slaughtered and enslaved till 1834. And after that, they had to deal with residential schools up until 1997. The last residential school closed in 1997 in Canada. And one of them had an electric chair. Go tell them you're not racist. Good night. But back to that meeting in 1833, you see how pro-British those resolutions are? That wasn't the kind of language the British brass in Lower Canada was used to hearing. The contrast between pro-British blacks and anti-British whites was heavier in 1834, the year the abolition law, abolition, however you pronounce that stupid English word, took hold. The only reason blacks were pro-British is because Britain was like, yeah, let's abolish slavery. They didn't care about black people. They wanted to paint themselves as, you know, the saviors or the good white people who are abolishing slavery. That's really it. You go today in the UK, the UK, look up the Windrush generations. which is mainly Jamaicans who went over there for a better life and to build the great British Empire. See how they were treated. You understand? In February that year, the Patriot majority in the Assembly, led by Louis-Joseph Papineau, son of Joseph Papineau, who was a slave master, and this is the same one that is revered in Quebec's history as damn near equivalent to the Quebecan Christ, Salakia, rammed through their own resolutions, 92 in all, a long list of complaints. The government in Lower Canada, they insisted, should be redrawn along American lines. It should be more democratic, better suited to Canadians than the British system, with its king and lords and ladies and class distinctions. They wanted to be like Americans, and it's no different. Listen, for the longest time, they wanted to be like Americans. You understand? What is it to be like an American back then? This means having segregation. That's what it meant. It needed laws, just like they fought to have their slaves, just like everywhere else in New France. Well, guess what? They wanted to fight to have their segregation. That's it. White people just want to be purely white everywhere. They don't want to have to mix with you. You know who they hated? You know, between the French and the British, who they hated the most is not each other, it's you. When I say you, I'm talking about you blacks and Native American Indians who were slaves in Canada. That's who they hated the most. All spring, summer, and fall, the Patriots called meetings to rally public support and to dump on the Tories. The Tories called counter meetings to damn the Patriots as traitors. It went on like this until the elections in October. While the whites were fixing for a fight, the blacks were in a party mood, preparing to celebrate the historic 1st of August, which is when slavery was abolished. In Montreal, they booked the public hall upstairs in St. Anne's Market. Then the cholera stepped in. It wasn't as bad as in 1832, but it was still a killer. It probably hit the 5 black Montrealers who died that year, all in July and August. At just 8 months old, Jacob Della Jr. was the youngest and the first to go. And on July 8th, he was the last of 3 children of Jacob Della and Catherine Gillett. None of their kids made it to the age of 2. That's because of cholera, right? We can skip down a bit. I'm talking about some black people who died of cholera that year when they were celebrating. So this is the hall where they met up to party and celebrate August 1st, 1834. We're no more slaves, technically. We're technically no more slaves. So they were celebrating. They had a party while white people just had white beef. You know what? We were partying. They're not going to teach that. They're not going to teach that in the history of Canada, that black people had a party. You understand? I'm seeing a comment just now. What's his person name? Planted Firm 444 said, do you think about anything besides race? Absolutely. I think about the suffering of my people. You understand? I think about that every day. I think about, you know, how to get my people off of drugs. Stop them from being prostituted. You understand? What you should ask white people that. You should ask white people, do they think about anything else besides race? Because the moment, what's his name, Charlie Kirk was shot like a deer in the neck, one of the first things they said, the governor, is it the governor? The governor of Utah said, he prayed for 33 hours saying, I pray it's not one of us. And you know what happened then? They found out it was a white man. That didn't stop them from blaming black people. They rallied to this. White people said, white men fight back. So why don't you ask white people if they think anything else besides race? Why always ask these questions to black people? Why pull the race card on us when we talk about our history? Planted Firm. Do you think about anything else besides race? If you're still in the chat? That's the question I should ask you. Do you think about anything else besides race? Because clearly you have a problem about black people speaking about black history. You should think about something else besides race. Or better yet, go tell white people who tell white people to fight back against, I don't know who, clearly not against white people. Tell them to stop thinking about race. Tell them when they racially profile us to stop thinking about race. Tell them when they try to meet their quota, their arrest quotas, whether it's in Canada or in the US, tell them to stop thinking about race. That's what you should do. You understand? You should stop thinking about race. As a matter of fact, the God of the Bible has a chosen people, has a chosen race that he prefers above all people on the face of the earth. Why don't you go and tell God to stop thinking about race? Do that. You understand? If you're a white person, really, you can have the caucasity to do that. If you're a brother, if you're a so-called Black, Latino, Native American, Indian, it's sad to see that state of slave mind that you have on you. Talk about something else besides race. We're not talking about race. It's not. I didn't make white people enslave us. We didn't ask to be enslaved by white people. We didn't ask to be fed to gators by white people. They happen to be the ones doing it. If you want to make it something else besides race, go tell God, okay, that his chosen people should not be based on a race. Tell that to the Most High God. And if you're a devil, I mean, listen, I can really care less about what you do. I care about my people. You should think about, you know, white on white crime. Apparently, it's a plague in the community. If you're a white man, go think about how to fix white communities when it comes to white on white crime. Apparently, it's plaguing y'all community and y'all using your potential candidates for the next presidency. It's bad. Go think about that. Now, let's get back to the class. Any other questions or comments? Trolling, idiots, racists, devils. I really couldn't care less. Y'all feel free to comment and boost the algorithm. We're live on I.S.U.P.K Montreal, I.S.U.P.K Toronto, I.S.U.P.K IAT, U.P.K La Puraneta podcast on YouTube and Facebook. Like, share, comment, subscribe. And if you're a brother of Black, Latino, and Native American descent on your father's side and want to be part of the school, click on the signing and sign out links in the chat. Don't forget. Now let's keep going. So again, this is the hall where Black people celebrated being free from slavery in Canada on August 1st, 1834. Right? Let's see, can we skip this? So finally, the big day dawned. The men gathered in the St. Anne's Market. John Patton, the shoemaker, opened the meeting with a psalm and a prayer. So like Alexander Grant gave the keynote speech, and then the brethren trooped over to St. George's Tavern on the waterfront for a dinner full of toast and song. The ships in the harbor hoisted their flags. The day has at length come when England, and not America, is entitled to the undisputed honor of being the land of liberty, gloated the Gazette. Because England say, yeah, listen, we're the best, we're better than Americans because we freed the slaves first. But mind you, that Americans are just British babies who just kept slavery for a longer while. That's it. In his speech, Grant gushed over Britain for dealing the death blow to slavery all over the world, which was not a fact. And he roasted the United States for its hypocrisy. While its 60-year-old Declaration of Independence proclaimed the equality of all men, and its people proudly sang of their country as the land of liberty, 2 million Americans languished in slavery. But he never breathed a word about parts of the British law which some abolitionists found hard to swallow, that slaves above the age of 6 were to continue working for their masters for a 6-year period as predial apprentices before being fully free. So you see, that's the problem with white people. There's always a cheat code somewhere. Even when they abolish slavery, they say, listen, if you're above 6 years old, you still have to work an extra 6 years for your master in order for you to be actually free. You understand? Good night. And the 20 million pounds in compensation was to be paid not to the slaves for their pain or to help them make a fresh start, but to the masters and their loss of human property. If you think only slave masters in the US, in France, or in Britain, I mean, really, that was part of Britain anyways. The slave masters got compensations everywhere we were enslaved. Throughout North, Central, and South America, the Caribbean islands, directly in the European mainland, they got compensation, not the slaves. Even in Canada, they will tell you the slave masters got compensation, not the slaves. You understand? And even when you got free, again, when you were free, they claimed that slavery was abolished. If you're 6 years old, and up, you still had to slave for an extra 6 years in order for you to be fully free. The white man is the devil the Bible speaks of. Grant wrapped up his speech with a call for 3 hearty cheers for old England, the true land of the brave and the home of the free. And that's the problem with Christianity. It will wrap your mind around an illusion that the white man is just. He freed y'all from slavery. Apparently, you know, the British abolished slavery, but you still have to be a slave for an extra 6 years if you're older than 6 years old in order for you to be fully free. He's the devil. And then reparations were paid to the slave masters and not the slave. So really, the land of the brave and the home of the free is not of the Caucasian man at all. You'd think that with their experience of slavery, blacks would have backed any call for freedom, and there were issues on which they and the patriots could see eye to eye. Reform of jury selection was one. Grant had brought the subject up in an open letter to the colored brethren residents of Montreal in May 1834. There were privileges of citizenship, he said, which the law strictly entitled us to, such as serving on juries, but which some unexplained cause have not been extended to us. There was no law barring blacks from jury duty, yet no black had ever served on a jury. Because even though there's no laws such as the Jim Crow laws in the US, Canada is just racist. They don't want to see black people in a jury. That's really what it is. It's plain and simple. And unlike in the US where you have to fight Jim Crow laws, you have to fight a law that's on paper, you can't fight the nature of your oppressor. You can't go to court to change their nature. There's nothing you can do to change the nature of your oppressor. He is a bloodthirsty monster. History will tell you that. Till this day. In France, y'all look it up. In France, they have something called the nigger hunt. They're hunting niggas. This is how you had the witch hunt, where you hunt for witches and burn them at the stake. In France, right now, was it last week? A group of white men started the nigger hunt. You cannot change their nature. Salakia. Here was Grant messing with the dragon, making people think about that maybe for the first time, and that's amazing. He could have shouted, "We know why no blacks are called for jury duty is because all of you racist pigs." But then everybody would have tuned them out. So he blamed some unexplained cause, leaving people to figure out the unexplained bit for themselves. He was smooth. He was not One West. One West will tell you straight up, yeah, because the white man's a devil and he's a racist. You understand? Again, Alexander Graham was a Christian. He could not have said openly that these oppressors, for some who are still slave masters. Imagine that. Slavery is abolished in 1834. You still have to be a slave for the next 6 years. He couldn't have said, yeah, they're liars. That the words is smoother than butter. With the Christian mind that he had, probably reading the Bible, he probably knew how to read. When did he pull the precept? What is it? Psalm 55 and 21, where his words were smoother than butter. You understand? But war was in his heart. Our oppressor is a goddamn liar. He's not honest. He was not open about saying, yeah, we don't need the niggas in the jury. But we knew that they didn't want black people in the jury. They didn't want us. They still do not want us. You understand? Maybe it was Jacob Grant, one of the quote-unquote 12 apostles, who brought the matter to his attention. In 1833, Jacob's name had been on the list of people who were qualified to sit on juries because of the property they owned, but he had never been called. In fact, it was his wife, Marianne Drummond, who should have been listed because she had paid for their house, but she was a woman, and who'd ever heard a woman on a jury? The Vindicator, a patriot newspaper, picked up Alexander Grant's letter and used it to stick to the Tories. So they use, as usual, they use our plight against, well, for their agenda. Being advocates for the extension of civil rights to all persons without difference or of color or creed, we cannot but regret that Mr. Grant's brethren should have to complain of the partiality of public officers. As far as the jury law provides, there is no distinction. If the colored men are excluded, it can be attributed only to those who are entrusted with the execution of the law and of which officers the House of Assembly complain. We repeat, the men of color, if qualified by property, have an equal right to be jurors as any other of His Majesty's subjects. And that should have been another telltale sign that we should just separate from our oppressor. We should not try to integrate with them. Right? They're using his plight about, yo, listen, this is unjust. How can we not be juries? You should have not cared of being a jury or not. That's what you should have done. You should have said, you can't be juries. Well, let's not be juries. Who cares? Let's not build the white society. That's what you should have said. But again, these brothers did not have the truth. They did not have the knowledge that the men of the I.S.U.P.K, the men of the Lord have. If white people want to exclude you, fine, so be it. We'll do our own thing. That's what they should have said. So there were grounds where blacks and patriots could meet, but the big stumbling block to their getting together was the specter of slavery. The patriots raved about the United States as the home of free institutions to blacks. It was the den of slavery. And it so happened that as the patriots began dropping hints at a US-style revolution might be in order, Britain abolished slavery. So the only thing they had in common with the patriots is that really nothing. The patriots had just used black injustice for their advantage. And these patriots, they said, listen, we want to be like the US. It would have brought slavery back. And if Britain abolished slavery, imagine having did a US-style revolution. Canada would have been separate from the British Commonwealth, just like the US was. They probably would have had the same Jim Crow laws as well. That didn't happen though, but that's exactly what they were aiming for. So there's no common ground, calling the stumbling block. There's just no common ground. These people would have probably tried to enslave you again. If not, enact laws such like the Jim Crow laws. That's really it. You can't trust, a snake because you think he's not venomous. Like what is not Martin Luther King? What's his name again? Muhammad Ali said, listen, I'm just gonna paraphrase. There's a group of snakes, right? Probably 3 are venomous. 10 of them are not venomous. Then I'm gonna try and grab the snake to think that, I might grab the non-venomous one. No, I'm not gonna take the chance. Shut the doors, lock it, throw the box away. What are you talking about? Risk to die just because you think you might find an okay white person? No, I'm not even gonna risk it. I'm just gonna listen. White people, just do your thing. Just leave our people alone. That's really it. Just leave us alone. At the end of the day, with the events that we've seen happen a couple of days ago, we see that even when we leave you alone, we don't go around you, you find a way to blame your problems on us. That's why y'all say white man fight back when Charlie Kirk got shot in the neck. That's why y'all threatened the HBCUs when Charlie Kirk got shot in the neck. That had nothing to do with black people. Utah is predominantly white. It was white on white crime. And y'all still found a way to blame us. Listen, these brothers should have just said, listen, they don't want us on juries in Montreal. Let white people do their things. That's it. Hey, Shalom, Yahweh, Shem Shabbat. Why for tuning in. Let's keep reading, yeah? So easy to see why blacks might figure, what good is democracy to me? Monarchy is best. That's why they'd rather side with Britain than with the US-style revolution, because the monarchy abolished slavery in Canada. No wonder the Vindicator, while presenting Grant as an intelligent, industrious, and humane man of color, slipped in that he was differing with us in politics because he was for black people. That's why. It wasn't only in Montreal that blacks and white reformers were at odds. The same thing happened in Upper Canada, which is modern-day Ontario or Toronto. William Lyon Mackenzie, who would lead the rebellions there, deplored the fact that in answering a questionnaire from the American Anti-Slavery Society in 1837, he said of blacks in Upper Canada, nearly all of them are opposed to every species of reform in the civil institutions of the colony. They are so extravagantly loyal to the executive that to the utmost of their power they uphold all the abuses of government and support those who profit by them. I regret that an unfounded fear of a union with the U.S. on the part of colored population should have induced them to oppose reform and free institutions in this colony, whenever they have had the power to do so. The apology I make for them in this matter is that they have not been educated as free men. I mean, we were slaves until 1834, and even when slavery was abolished, if you were 6 years old or older, you had to be a slave for an extra 6 years in order for you to be officially free. Talking about that we have not been educated as free men. We've been slaves since what? The 1492. Good night. We're still slaves today. The shackles is just not physical. It's just spiritual. You understand? Talking about making an apology for the slave because they haven't been educated as free men. You have the caucasity to do that. You have the white privilege to apologize for the slave that was not educated as a free man. You're the reason he was not educated as a free man because you're the one who enslaved them. Salakia. Damn right. And today we're still not totally free. Absolutely. The apology can make for Mackenzie is that he was not black. And as a spokesman for Montreal's blacks, Alexander Grant warmed the hearts of the Tories with his praise for England. Because again, the Patriots wanted to be like the US, the Tories are more like loyalists who are on the side of England. The only reason we had black people on the side of England is because they're the ones who abolished slavery in the English colonies. Outside of the US, because the US had separated themselves from England by then. Here was proof from the mouths of those who had known real oppression that Britain was, well, great, which wasn't. If blacks were all for British rule, what did the Patriots have to complain about? In the elections for Lower Canada's Assembly in October 1834, some whites tried to draw the blacks into their fight, as they always do. The Patriots candidates for the 2 seats in the westward of Montreal, which is the west side of Old Montreal and downtown today, were Papineau himself and City Councilor Robert Nelson, a doctor who trained under Dr. Daniel Arnoldi. Tory newspapers reported that his nomination meeting, Nelson had really stuck his foot in it, in putting down Irish voters who claimed that only an Irishman could represent them. He was supposed to have said, as well might our German fellow citizens insist upon our nominating one of them, or I will go further and say that if we are to yield to the presentations of the Irish, the niggas, Salakia, says N-I-G-G-E-R-S, they said they're niggers, who are numerous likewise, would have an equal right to send one of their body to the house. And you thought, there's no racism in Canada? Good night. Listen, I guess since slavery, the gingers think they're niggas too. They think they were entitled to say the N-word. Damn, there's Irish people in Montreal. They hate you. Now there's a pretty kettle of fish, and Nelson couldn't plead that he didn't know the microphone was switched on because microphones didn't exist in 1834, meaning it was not a mishap. It was not an accident. That's just how they speak. That's just how they are. After criticizing Nelson for the way he spoke of the Irish and Germans, the Gazette went on, as to the colored portion of our community, they are not so numerous nor so wealthy as the others we have mentioned. but they have never forfeited their right to a decent and proper regard for their feelings by any set of misconduct. We have to watch ourselves to make sure we abide by the white standard. Here they are free men and fully entitled to the exercise of their privileges as British subjects in whatever way it may suit their inclination, which is a lie. As we mentioned before, they showed themselves that even when slavery was abolished, you're still a slave for another 6 years, which is diabolical. The color of the body can have no effect on the qualities of the mind, and the sons of Africa will ever receive in this province the respect that it is their due, so long as they support the laws and the Constitution which confers upon them all the blessings of British liberty. Again, we're not African. Even though they took us from there, we dwelt there temporarily, and the Africans sold us to these white people. While they are persecuted almost to death, yeah, by the free and independent citizens of America and debarred of their privileges, here they are really equal, which again is a lie. And no doubt at the coming elections, such of them as have votes or influence will show their disapproval of a party by whom they are contemned and despised by voting against Dr. Nelson. The warning to blacks to hang with the Tories or else was none too subtle. Had there been signs that they were leaning the other way, was the claim that here they are really equal meant as an answer to Grant's open letter of the previous spring, in which he had dared to suggest that some unexplained cause denied black people their full rights? Who knows? But the Patriots insisted that Nelson had never put down the Irish, Germans, or blacks. It was all just slamming by those slime bucket Tories. Now, whatever the truth of the matter is, it was the first time black Montrealers were acknowledged as a political force. Why? Because white people had internal beef and they needed blacks on their side somehow. And some of them used the fact that black people are having a voice about something. So let's use that voice that they have, but not for their issue, but for our issue. Let's have them side with either side of white people. And they still don't teach you that in school. In an election where every vote counted, especially on the greatly outnumbered Tory side, the Gazette had made a pitch for the black vote. But the Patriots swept the province, and Nelson and Papineau both made it. Tensions between the Patriots and Tories continued to mount, and they lent a political edge to what turned out to be the high point of Grant's career, the Betsy Freeman affair. Betsy was a black teenager from the US who accompanied her mistress on a trip to Montreal in the spring of 1836. The black grapevine hummed, and the question on everyone's mind was, is that girl a servant or a slave? Which is crazy word, because they, on official Canadian documents, they will use the word servant, property of, belonging to, not to say slave. And those were all slaves, you understand? Grant heard that Betsy was a slave, that her mistress's husband, Ebenezer Marvin of Charlotte, North Carolina, was a slaveholder. To make sure, he called on Betsy on Sunday, June 12th, and she told him that yes, she was a slave and wanted to leave Anne Gelston, her mistress, who had abused her. Yes, you can't make this up. Our oppressor is a monster. But where could she go, a 14-year-old in a strange country without friends or work? Grant told her she could stay at his place and his wife would take care of her. And Betsy went along. The next day, Anne Gelston, he just said, listen, you staying with us. He took the slave away from the slave master. He said, nah, you're not going back to that monster. You're staying with us. Most High in Christ. Brotherhood is a weapon. And brotherhood extends from just brother to brother. His brother is a husband to his wife, is you being a father figure to these children. That's brotherhood. It's not just me being a brother to another brother. You understand? We look out for our people. And that's what Grant did that day. He said, Betsy, you're not a slave anymore. You're staying with us. My wife will take care of you. The next day, Anne Gelston filed a complaint that Betsy had deserted her service. High Constable Benjamin DeLille showed up at Grant's house with a warrant for Betsy's arrest, made out by Magistrate Dr. Daniel Arnoldi, the same who had bought the big syringe at John Trim's estate sale, where Grant had bought a sword. Splakia. As Grant soon learned, Arnoldi acted not only in his capacity of justice of the peace, but as doctor to Betsy Freeman's mistress, who was in an advanced state of pregnancy. The woman, the slave master, pregnant, that doctor is her doctor. You know, he's like, yo, listen, you're bringing the slave back because we need her to give birth or whatever nonsense they had said, right? Instead of taking the girl to the police station, the Leo took her to Arnoldi's and Grant went along too. The doctor gave Betsy a tongue lashing and threatened to lock her up. He was the prison doctor besides being a magistrate, so he had the power to do so. Imagine that. Listen, this devil has all types of power. He's the doctor of the slave master. He's the prison doctor. So he said, listen, I'm going to lock you up because she has access to the prison. He's the magistrate, so he could write warrants and say, yeah, arrest these niggas. Yes, that you just go see him for everything. You go see him to arrest people. You go see him to get your meds. You just go, he's the man to go see. Good night. The white man is the devil. Upon my endeavoring to plead for the girl, Grant said, the honorable magistrate took me by the collar and degraded himself by kicking me. Breathe, we in a Christian land, the vindicator sputtered. Yes, this is Christian behavior, by the way. Is this the sort of justice that our magistrates are sworn to administer? Betsy was returned to her mistress, who was staying with her in-law, the jeweler James Dwight, and Grant suing into action. On the Sunday of Betsy's arrest, he filed a charge of assault against Arnoldi because Grant, I mean, mind you, he's free. He's a free black man in Canada. Not Betsy though. He's a free black man who thinks he has rights. He also swore an affidavit that unless the court stepped in, Betsy might be spirited back to the States. Grant's lawyer, Charles Ovidi Perrott, aged 26, was a rising star of the Patriots, elected to the Assembly in 1834 as the member for Vaudreuil. He filed the affidavit in the court the next day, asking that a judge look into Betsy's case. The court issued a writ of habeas corpus, ordering Gelston to produce Betsy without delay. But Arnoldi replied that Gelston was better ridden and couldn't comply. They said, yeah, she can't bring the slave. She's too sick to send her away. This makes things dicey. There was talk that Dwight's son was planning to sneak Betsy out of the country before the court had a chance to hear the case. So Grant and other blacks set up a round-the-clock watch outside of Dwight's house on College Street, which is today is still downtown. That's damn near next to our camp spot today. That's funny as hell. On that Monday night, June 13, a commotion there led to Grant and two other black men, Moses Powell Wormley and George Nixon, being charged with causing a riot. So Betsy Freeman, a black girl, comes to town and boom, all hell breaks loose and 3 court cases results. And not many girls, black or white, ever caused such a stir. Man, say, listen, I'm saving the sister. Salakia. He said, I'm saving the sister. That's what the brother said. The habeas corpus case, being the most pressing, was the first to be heard, and it went ahead on Wednesday, June 15, without Ann Gelston. U.S.-born lawyer Charles Dewey Day, a Tory who knew the Gelston family, appeared for Ann Gelston and presented her statement, sworn before Justice of the Peace Daniel Arnoldi. According to Gelston, Betsy Freeman was no slave. The girl was her husband's indentured servant. And this changed the whole case, because if she's not a slave, she's just free to go. She also claimed that Betsy is desirous of remaining in the service of the said Ann Gelston and of avoiding all communications with the said Grant and the people of her own color, by whom he is supported and encouraged in his attempt to seduce the said Elizabeth from the care and service of the said Ann Gelston, which is a lie. She said to Grant, listen, I want to leave. I want to stay in Canada. I want to leave the U.S. because I'm being abused by my slave master. Now they're turning around saying, well, no, she's no slave. She's an indentured servant. And She don't want to. She wants to stay with her master, and she don't want to speak to Grant or his brothers and sisters, meaning the other black people in Montreal. Right? That's what they were saying, which is a lie, of course. Since Gelston had no papers proving Betsy was a servant, not a slave, the court couldn't take her word for it. Everything depended on what Betsy had to say. But she froze. She gave her name, her age as about 15 or 16, and told the court that she was from North Carolina. And she wanted to go back there with her mistress. Clearly, she's being coerced because she told one thing to Grant, now she's switching up. Who knows what happened between that time where she had to switch up. The court told her she was free to do so as she pleased, and she did go back with Gelston. The fullest account of the case appeared in the Patriot newspaper La Minerve, and no wonder Grant's lawyer wrote for the paper, which was published by his older brother. There are no letters either to give us a glimpse inside his home or shop, but the hairdressing must have gone well because February 1838 he advertised for an apprentice. So fast forward, you know, that's really it. They're gonna say, I mean, he's still there advertising. You know, this is the story of Grant they don't teach about in Montreal. He wanted a boy of 14 to 15. He said someone who spoke French and English, a Canadian boy he preferred. It was another affirmative step, a black man who not only hired whites, which he ended up doing at some point, but broadcast to the world that he would be the master of a white boy. You understand? Good night. In Betsy Freeman's North Carolina, in most states, in fact, whites wouldn't have stood for that. In Montreal, there was not a peep. They didn't care. Because there was no laws necessarily. I mean, there was racism, but they were not paying attention to Grant like that. They didn't give a damn about what he said. He didn't, you know, he was irrelevant. He advertised to the world, yo, listen, I'm the master of a white boy. The white boy is not a slave, though. So it's like, yeah, whatever. Say whatever you want. You're delusional. Full freedom came to the slaves of the West Indies in the summer of 1838. The 6-year apprenticeship system launched in 1834 had turned out to be pretty much an extension of slavery in all but name, and it was cut short. The last slaves were released at midnight on July 31st. It was the 1st of August all over again. A few weeks after this, Grant's turn on stage came to an end as absurd as it was abrupt. August 20th was a big day at the races. Lord Durham, the new Governor General sent by England to pick up the new pieces after the shootout of 1837, was there with all his gleaming crew. You have to see the ladies in their jewels and fine dresses and all the Army Navy brasses, and everybody who was anybody had turned out to see and be seen, including Grant. Salakia, that night he rode home, his head full of the spectacle and the sport. His horse was spooked by a cow. It reared and threw him, and he died a couple hours. He was 37, done by a cow, not a dragon, but a cow. You see, the only thing that the brother was fighting for to have slavery abolished. Instead, he was the first black man with an advertisement. His days ended because his horse got spooked by a cow. Good night. That is sad indeed. A newspaper editor paid tribute to him, saying Mr. Grant was a man of color, but respectable and very upstanding. He might have left out the but, that loaded little word, which implied that Grant, unlike other blacks, was respectable. The editor was well-meaning, but in praising one dead black man, he insulted all the live ones. It was enough to make Grant turn over in his grave. Listen, the brother got damn. That's a sad. The brother just got unalived by, a cow. Good night. Bad news, Lewis. Let's see who is Lewis. But again, you see how nobody speaks about Grant in school or whatever the case is. Our oppressor will never tell you that black people had a whole coalition to speak against black issues in Montreal during slavery. They celebrated the abolition of slavery, August 1st, 1834. They're not going to say that they used black voices voicing their issues for the white agenda. They're never going to tell you that, even if it benefited them. Our oppressor is a goddamn devil. The Consultation Committee of Colored People of Montreal met in early 1846. If there was such a body, it was the first black organization formally set up with an official name in Montreal. Mind you, Grant just had a meeting. It was not a formal meeting with an official name. It just met up 12 black men to speak about black issues. This is the first black organization we're going to see formally set up with an official name in Montreal. The people who are supposed to have attended were real enough. Moses Carter, who kept a hairdressing shop at Saint-François-Xavier in Commissioner Street, La Commune, apparently was the chairman. And Peter Gerard Lee, a bit of a bad apple, good night, and a hairdresser too, acted as a secretary. Two others who are supposed to have played minor parts were William Paul, at different times a tavern keeper and an engineer in charge of the steam engine, and Peter Dago, Darren Skurber, which we've seen earlier. The man who did all the talking was Israel Lewis, and that's the problem. He's the only one who left a record of the committee's existence. We have to take his word for it, and his word isn't worth much. Why do we have to take his word as if the only one who left the mark? Because listen, they don't teach about black history in Canada. That's why. You could shout it on TV, you could post it all over the internet that Lewis was a snake in the grass and no one would give you an argument. Historians will tell you he was bad news, but they don't necessarily have a proof of it. And of course, Lewis would deny it if he could, but he died long ago in 1847. The summer of the big typhus epidemic, when thousands of starving Irish, driven from home by the famine, sailed to North America on filthy ships, dying on the way or on landing. Moses Carter died that summer too on July 31st. Lewis didn't make his name in Montreal. His bad reputation came from his association with Wilberforce, the black refugee settlement he had helped found in Biddulph Township, near London, Upper Canada, that's London, Ontario, at a place called Lucan. He spent only the last few years of his life in Montreal, but two things that he did in the city, publishing a record of the CCCPM meeting and making out his will, can give us a key understanding where Bad News Lewis came from. And what's make a man like Lewis go bad? Well, slavery. He'd been a plantation slave in the American South, where sneakiness, faking, and masking the truth were survival skills. If the law made it illegal for you to learn to read and write, you wanted to keep your book and pencil stub out of sight. If you were bright and the whites were dumb, you played dumber. Your masters were beasts, you bowed to them. If you had ambition, well, too bad. Lewis escaped to Cincinnati in the Free State of Ohio. The Constitution of the Free State of Ohio denied blacks' right to vote, to hold public office, or to serve in the militia. In 1804, this first session of the Ohio legislature passed an act to regulate black and mulatto persons, requiring all of them living in the state to have a court certificate proving they were free. You need a certificate from the court to say, yes, I am not a slave no more. Good night. No certificate meant no job. The law made it illegal for anyone to hire you. If you were a runaway slave, the law made it illegal for anyone to help you in any way. In 1807, they increased the penalties for helping a fugitive and added some new twists. All blacks settling in Ohio had to get two whites to post a bond of $500 guaranteeing their good behavior, and no black or mulatto could testify against a white in court. Enforcement of these black laws was slack until June 29, 1829. Then the trustees of Cincinnati Township, responding to calls from whites to do something about the growing black population, cracked the whip. Blacks had 30 days, later extended to about 60, to line up $500 bonds if they hadn't done so already. The stage was set for Israel Lewis. the colored people had a meeting and talked about a court of appeals to test the law. James Brown, a former slave, recalled years later. Some talked of going to Texas. Good night. We knew not what to do. We were sore perplexed. I spoke to them of Canada, and we formed a colonization society of which I was president. I wrote for the board to Lieutenant Governor Sir John Colborne at Little York, now Toronto, to know if we could find in Canada an asylum for ourselves, our wives, and children. At that time, slavery was abolished in 1834 in Canada. So maybe it probably was better than staying in Cincinnati, but damn, good night. 2 members of the board went with the letter to Toronto and were well received by Sir John. Lewis was one of the 2 sent to Upper Canada, and he arranged to buy a whole township from the Canada Company. But when the time came to pay for it, there was no money. And the Canada Company became so frustrated at its dealings with Lewis that it refused to sell land to blacks from then on. Some land was purchased anyway with money from Quakers in Indiana, and the colony was begun with a dozen or so families. Listen, you know how hard it is for us to buy land in Canada? It's hard to buy land in Canada. There's a whole strip in Toronto called Little Jamaica. Little Jamaica is mainly our people, our businesses, but it's being torn down by gentrification and mismanagement of funds. It's not easy ever since to get funds if you're a black or brown person. I don't mean brown. I don't mean brown like Canada talking about East Indians. I'm talking about our Latino brothers. You understand? Canada racist, they said that they became so frustrated at his dealings with Lewis that they refused to sell land to blacks from then on. Damn, that's crazy. Since slavery, you understand? The board of managers under Brown named Lewis its agent to raise funds in the U.S. in 1831. The settlement's residents elected a new board with Austin Stewart as president. He'd been a grocer in Rochester, New York. This new board also gave Lewis the power to go fundraising in the States. Fundraising he did all right and lived high on the hog, but sent precious little money back. People started asking questions that first year after trying many times to call Lewis to account. Like, this man went to go fundraising and he's not sending any money back for the board. The board sacked him early in 1832, but he wouldn't quit and went on passing himself off as the agent of Wilberforce settlement. On Christmas Day 1832, the board warned its well-wishers not to give Lewis any more money, because he is now practicing a deception upon our friends in the United States by taking up donations, pretending that such gifts will be faithfully applied to our relief. The man just taking money. I think there was something called the PADNA system in the UK, right? It's like you could all put money together and you help each other out, right? And afterwards, afterwards, you know, it goes to the next family, so on and so forth, right? It stopped because brothers started stealing the money. Well, the same with Lewis. Lewis, who did not have the truth, didn't have brotherhood. They said Lewis started stealing the money. He was supposed to get donations, and they tried to fire him, and he's still going over there amassing donations in the name of the Black Coalition in Montreal, the Black Settlement. They said, don't give this man no money, because he's claiming he's collecting the money for the people. We don't know where the money's going. We ain't receiving nothing. So in New York, Arthur Tappan, however you pronounce it, one of the white founders of the American Anti-Slavery Society, which he'd been in business in Montreal, Slovakia, up to the war in 1812, published a notice in February 1833 that Lewis had obtained in this city at different times upwards of $1,500, which is something at that time, for the above named settlement, of which money he has paid over short of $100. 3 years later, Lewis was still at it. And on March 28, 1836, the Wilberforce Board issued a notice saying, "We deeply regret the manner in which our friends in the States have been imposed upon by Israel Lewis, and that we were hereby informed them that as a board of managers or otherwise, we have received less than $100 of all the money borrowed and collected in the U.S." This man, they're claiming that he collected over $1,500 at the time, and he only gave them $100. Good night. In April that year, the colored citizens of New York, after sending somebody to check out Wilberforce, held a public meeting and concluded that Israel Lewis had abused their confidence, wasted their benevolence, and forfeited all claim to their countenance and respect. On May 20th, Philadelphia blacks, who had been stung too, met to discuss the Lewis case, recalling the misery the blacks of Cincinnati had known in 1929. They said, "With persecution behind and suffering around, and want uncertainty before them, an individual in the stolen garb of philanthropy addressed himself to their peculiar and painful condition. And in order that he might carry out more fully his knavish and corrupt designs, he insinuated himself into their confidence, and obtained their recommendation to solicit from the public such aid as their pressing demands called for. His appeal was successful, as has been evinced by his extravagant mode of living ever since this fatal and misconfided mission. We say to the public that we have not the remotest degree of confidence in said Israel Lewis or any of his appointed agents." On it went until the late 1830s, when Wilberforce itself was in shambles. Stewart, the Wilberforce president, later wrote that Lewis had tried to frame him on a charge of stealing money. He'd had 2 of Stewart's horses poisoned and him poisoned too. And when that didn't finish him, he'd ambush him on the road one night and try to shoot him dead. Good night. Lewis's wife was so disgusted by his antics that she left him. Stewart had a lot to say about Lewis in his memoirs, which you can find in 22 Years a Slave and 42 Years a Freeman. In a chapter called Character and Death of Israel Lewis, he tried to explain what made the man tick. Lewis had a natural energy and strength of character. Stewart said he had quick perception, his personal appearance was prepossessing, his manner and address easy and commanding. And while he had little education, he had managed to gather a sufficient knowledge of sciences to enable him to read and write, together with quite a fund of general information, and then his shrewdness and tact accomplished all the rest. Lewis had once addressed the New York legislature with eloquence and marked effect. He was, you might say, exceptional. But the worm of slavery had eaten him up inside, which they explained that Lewis was not necessarily a bad man. He was just the product of his environment, which is being a slave. You understand? He's not just a natural bad apple. Lewis was a product of slavery, was a destroyed brother, just like many others. That's who he was. He was not a crook by nature. He wasn't. He was an oppressed, destroyed brother. As a plantation slave, he had been subjected to all the cruelties and deprivations of a bondman. His natural abilities were above mediocrity, but having never had the advantages of an education or the privileges of a society calculated to cultivate and refine his natural aspiring intellect and to direct his indomitable will, he had come to manhood with a determined selfish disposition to accomplish whatever gratified his vanity or administered to the wants of his animal nature. Neither Stewart nor anyone since seems to have considered the possibility that Lewis was insane. But then, no one seems to have taken note of the pamphlet he published in Montreal in April 1846 called Crisis in North America, Slavery, War, Balance of Power, and Oregon. Taken together with Stewart's assessments, this pamphlet suggested that while its author, whom the cover identified as Israel Lewis, colored man, was sharp, he also suffered from delusions. The first part of the pamphlet is billed as a report signed by Moses Carter, a chairman, and by P.J. Lee as secretary of the Consultation Committee of Colored People in Montreal. It's about the preamble and resolutions that Lewis submitted to a meeting of the CCCPM on how to end American slavery. Lewis's main resolution was that we, the Consultation Committee of Colored People of Montreal, will petition Her Most Gracious Majesty Queen Victoria to authorize the assembling of 100,000 colored men and all others who may feel disposed to join us at Niagara, Upper Canada, that's by the waterfalls, for the purpose of putting an end to slavery. So they call him crazy because he wanted to end slavery in the US. Crazy idea, and anyone who wondered how this righteous army was going to wipe out slavery was referred to the Bible. Nat Turner was not the only one who read the Bible, who understood that this is how we get freedom, not by being Christian. You understand? Israel Lewis was another one. Israel Lewis read the Bible and said, this is how we free our people. Of course, he did not do it the right way, but he had the spirit to it. Again, that so-called image of a crook, the portrait of him, no one could verify that. You understand? And for those who try to say they were there, they verified in their memoirs, they're saying, well, he was a product of slavery. It's not his fault. He was abused. He was a product of slavery. That's why make him be selfish. But really, Salakia, he wrote in Montreal a letter saying, listen, we need to free the slaves. He read the Bible and said, yeah, we're freeing the slaves. It says he read Jeremiah chapter 47 concerning the destruction of the Philistines. Also the 48th chapter, same book against Moab. We would likewise call the attention of our readers to the 5th chapter of the Epistle of St. James. This man read the Bible saying, yes, it's us that we're going to free. You understand? We're going to free ourselves just like, we were freed from the Philistines, from the Moabites. This man went to the Bible. And this is why they did not want you to read, they did not want you to read the Bible during slavery. Because you will read instances like this one. Right? You will read this in the Bible. That's why they didn't want you to read the Bible in slavery. Nat Turner read the Bible, not the slave Bible. He read the Bible. This is how he started his revolution. Just like Israel Lewis had planned as well. You understand? They don't teach you that. And never mind all the problems and expense of trying to muster, house, feed, arm, and drill 100,000 people in the boonies of Canada. There wasn't the ghost of a chance that anyone in their right mind would buy the scheme. And if they had, did Lewis think the United States would stand by and watch as a black army massed on its doorstep? Needless to say, abolitionists never fell for it. And the press didn't breathe a word. Lewis said nothing about how the CCCPM reacted, no word of any discussion or any vote on his proposals. There is no voice heard but his own. In an appendix, he wrote of the saber rattling going on between the United States and Britain over the Oregon Territory on the West Coast, which both countries claimed. Lewis thought this was a symptom of the real issue, which was monarchy versus democracy in North America and the coming showdown between them. I feel it a duty that I owe to my God and my colored brethren. Mind you, this man was reading the Bible and say, yeah, we're going to free the slaves just like we got free from the Philistines and the Moabites. His brethren are the colored ones. Mind you, some people knew who they were. Salakia. Bond and free to entreat them speedily to decide which side they will take in this great struggle. I hope you will permit me to say that you ought by all means to go heart and hand for a monarchical form of government. Again, why did they go for monarchy? Because Great Britain decided to say, yeah, we're going to free the slaves and we're going to be the land of the brave and the free, not America. That's the only reason why people were going for the monarchy, because Britain freed the slaves before the U.S. That's it. But they still did the same thing, really. I hope we, one and all, will rally round the British flag and put an end to this base and foul traffic in human flesh. That every African or descendant of the American continent in 50 years will be governed by British law. Alexander Grant and others had expressed strong pro-British views before, but Lewis seemed less pro-British than hurt deep down. Really, he was just pissed off being a slave in the South. He was tired of slavery. Not that he was, a lot of them, not that they were pro-British. They didn't give a damn really about the royalty. They just wanted slavery to end. They did not know how to do it, though. They did not know how not to be slaves no more. That's the problem. That's why you need to come to class and learn how to not be a slave no more. You know how to free your mind. The truth will set you free. Just say it. Say it with me. The white man is the devil, the Bible speaks of. It's a lot. Eager to see Queen Victoria grind Uncle Sam into the dirt the way Uncle Sam had ground him down. If Lewis was deranged, it is not hard to find a cause. Why? Because Ecclesiasticus 7, is it what? 7 and 7 says, oppression maketh a wise man mad. And Lewis was that wise man who was oppressed. If slavery and racism can make a man go bad, they could just as well make him go mad. Good night. You hear a lot about how slavery broke the bodies of slaves, but what about their minds? What about the lingering hurt of those who got away? Or the dread that free blacks lived with every day, knowing that slavery lurked in the shadows, ready to jump them if they came within reach? Lewis never really escaped slavery. It had entered his soul, and he felt it there. He knew he was born to shine, but he wouldn't. He had the talent to go far, but he went nowhere. There's some pretty strong language in his pamphlet. Take this passage only a sentence long. It says, the ungodly slaveholder seduces the helpless, unoffending slave woman, and she is compelled to act as the lamb who licks the knife of its bloody slaughterer. The sexual abuse of slave women by their masters was commonplace, but Lewis put it in a way that still jolts. He's like, damn, that's the metaphor he used about our women being raped by the master. He said, the ungodly slaveholder seduces the helpless, unoffending slave woman, and she is compelled to act as the lamb who licks the knife of its bloody slaughterer. They say, damn, that's shocking. That was commonplace. That was happening all the time. Here's another passage. Another of the horrifying evils of slavery is amalgamation and cohabitation between father and daughter, mother and son, sister and brother. These occurrences happen in consequence of the manner in which they are separated, sold when they are young, and sent into various parts of the slave-holding countries, where they grow up without any knowledge of their relationship, and they amalgamate in the way above mentioned. Good God, stop the institution of slavery for the sake of thy son. He didn't ask the white man to do it. He said, listen, we need to be free like in the Bible. Is thy son Jesus Christ or Israel Lewis? Had Lewis lived these things himself, that would have been pretty traumatic. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe he was speaking from hearsay or reaching for effect. But he sure knew the words to make you squirm. 5 days before his death, on June 5th, 1847, at the age of 52, Lewis made out his will in Montreal General Hospital to Peter Albert O'Connell Lee, his first son of P.J. Lee. He left 50 acres in Biddulph Township. He left other lands in that area to his executors to be sold to establish and support as long as possible a school or some other institute for the purpose of conferring the blessings of education on the colored inhabitants of this province of Canada. He also asked his executors to patent my invention of fire screen and the escape ladder, any benefits to go to the school. And they don't teach that. You understand? They're not going to teach it because our oppressor is a monster. Salakia. You understand? our oppressor will never teach that this brother was writing letters against slavery in Montreal. It's the first official formally Salaki, the first official black coalition, not the ones that we see with Alexander Grant, right? Because that was not official. There's just 12 Salaki, 12 black men, right? Meeting up together. But him, he said, listen, even the image, the portrait of him being a crook, he said, give the money, he said, give the money to establish and support as long as possible a school or some other such institute for the purpose of conferring the blessings of education on the colored inhabitants of this province of Canada. They wanted you to be educated. He said, I don't want brothers and sisters in Montreal, in Quebec, to be stupid, to be uneducated. That's what he sold his land for. They call him Bad News Lewis as if he was just a crook. But the image of the crook they're portraying of him, they say, yeah, that was a result of slavery. He was an oppressed man. He got mad. He's not bad. He's actually smart. He knows how to read and write. He has wits, but he's a crook. And because of slavery, because he's hurt. And really, he wrote a letter saying, listen, this is how a woman get treated. Like a lamb licking the knife of their slaughter. He was talking about our women being raped all the time. He made allusions to our brothers and sisters being separated from their family. He read the Bible. He said, "No, we ought to be free." That's what he read in the Bible, just like Nat Turner did. You understand? Lance, we're about to end it with this one. We're gonna continue next week. Next week should be our last installments. Like it, this was a long installment for the history classes and a lot of slides. Next Sunday, as a matter of fact, next Sunday is the Feast of Blowing of Trumpets. So the Sunday after that we'll finish, right? At least this this topic of Montreal Blacks then. So lands and inventions seem to have been all in his head. Stewart wrote that Lewis died leaving not enough of all his gains to afford his decent burial. He was buried in the poor ground of the Protestant cemetery on Papineau Street. No doubt Lewis gave Wilberforce a bad name and damaged the cause he claimed to champion. He was bad news, but to all who condemned him as the devil in disguise, it might be time to say yes, but he wasn't as bad as being portrayed. It may be time to appeal the verdict of history and to enter a plea of insanity on his behalf. Or maybe just that this is what happened to an oppressed brother. You know, he didn't have bad intentions. And of course, they say he'd kill you if he knew. So with that, we're going to end it right here. You understand? So lock you 1 second. I'm going to end it right here. I'm going to get a security announcements. But this is some of the black gold they don't teach you about. Don't teach you about the black revolutionaries who said, let's end the same way the Britain's going to end slavery in the British colonies and in Canada, whatever the case is. We need to help our West Indian brothers. We need to help our so-called black Americans, brothers and sisters. They're not going to teach you that. You understand? They're not going to teach you about all these so-called prominent black people in Canada, the business owners, the first black man, Alexander Grant, the first black man who was not advertised as merchandise, but who was advertising his services in the Montreal newspapers. A couple years later, he would have been the one advertised as merchandise. They won't teach you that. You'll only learn about your history in the so-called Israelite School of Universal and Practical Knowledge, the I.S.U.P.K, and nowhere else. You understand? They won't teach you that black man who had revolutionary ideas of freedom read from the Bible. They're not going to tell you that. Israel Lewis read from the Bible and say, yeah, we need to be free. They will teach you that basically you were given the Bible and that's how you're a slave. Nat Turner read the Bible and yeah, we see what happened. Israel Lewis read the Bible and said, no, we finna be free. We ain't gonna be subservient. We gotta be free. Just like we were free from the Philistines. Just like we were free from the Moabites. We gotta be free from slavery. You understand? With that said, I'm gonna get the security announcements. We're gonna do the rest of the class. Not next week. Next week we have the Feast of Blowing of Trumpets. The week after that, we have the next class, right? With that said, the water for everybody who tuned in, let me put the sign up. So let me put the sign out links for the class. Make sure you click on the sign in and the sign out links if you want to be part of the school. With that, we're going to get a security announcement and close the class. The water for everybody who tuned in. Shalom, Israel. Here's the I.S.U.P.K security announcements. We are the I.S.U.P.K, started out at 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under Commandant General YAHANNA. Rule for your brother and sister. When a new brother or sister comes into the school, they're off limits for 6 months. They're to be saluted only. They're here to shed themselves of the world. If they need transportation, the teacher will arrange it. After 6 months, if a brother or sister has an interest in a particular person, he or she must get permission from the head to speak to a brother or sister. There is another 6 months in which the brother and sister will court each other. After the 6-month period, the brother and sister will get permission from the head to marry. Tithes, which is a commandment. Numbers chapter 18, verse 21, and Malachi chapter 3, verse 8 to 10, means 10th in the Hebrew. Ma'ashara, 10% of every penny of any increase the Lord gives you. Give to the treasury department or teacher. Priest fund, free will offering for priests non-mandatory, whatsoever amount you'd like. Upcoming holy convocation, again, next Sunday, September 21st, we have the memorial of blowing of trumpets, which is the first of the 7th month, which is Sunday, September 21st, 2025. You can read more about it in the book of Leviticus, chapter 23, verse 24 to 25. Reminder to all Akim and Aquatim to check the bulletin board, the hallway of the school. They have a physical location. Anyone who wants to be a trooper in the school to start wearing all black, boots, shirt, pant, headband, scarf. But that's what we'll give a courtesy salute to the brothers and a courtesy salute to the sisters. Mina visual imagine, which means to stand. We'll give a courtesy salute to the brothers. Mina visual imagine Shabbat. Imagine Barak. Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai Brakatam, meaning Yahweh in the name of Yahweh Shai bless y'all. Yajamata, which means hands down. Sar, which means to turn. So turn if is the sisters, we'll give them a courtesy salute as well. Mina visual imagine Shabbat. Imagine Barak. Yahweh Shamar, Alatan Bahashim, Yahweh Shai. And Yahweh watch over y'all in the name of Yahweh Shai. Yajamata, class dismissed.
Warning. Say this from me heart on a rum chat. Here we contact, get your gun shot. Make it sun dark and the ground black. We plant calm but I never agriculture. I know the eagle in the younger the vehicle when young people that are the vulture. Say them evil never the vulture. They coulda run pan diesel that a fee punja. Away the blood clot. Do some gun back. Away the blood clot. Do some gun back. Easy we coulda squeegee inna the Honda. Sleepy gunshot beat him inna him slumber. Greedy fi make them dopey a the younger. Glad say me nah pre when me the younger. That no mean say no pussy can try. Pussy try run up and give with them life. Can't see penalty give with 3 points. This one West boy you must see one die. Away the blood clot. Do some gun back. Away the blood clot. Do some gun back. Don't stop worrying. My talk them are real. Pedigree. Don't stop while we win. You will see. My talk them are real. Pedigree.
Hey, listen, brothers and sisters, man. If you like what you hear, hit the subscribe button, man. Subscribe to this channel. And also, please, go to ISUPK.com and pay your tithe. Drop me some cash so we can move around this planet like we need to, man, and do the things we need.